everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I have a full review for you of the Warden, which is the brand new Cold War premium tank released with this week's update. This is an independent alliance Era 2 medium tank with a very strong turret. It's got the turret of the Era 3 Leopard 2, the hull of the Era 1 M48 pattern, and the gun of the Leopard VT2, so a very hard-hitting gun indeed. And in today's video I'll go over all of the stats of the Warden in just a second over on Excel, where we're going to compare to the Leopard VT2, the Super M48, and I'll also compare to the Magak 5, so very similar hull down playstyles. Then we'll talk about my commander and equipment setup, and I'll show you the armor profile of the Warden. So there are very good parts and very bad parts, and then we'll get stuck into 5 gameplays at the end of today's video. So if you wanted to pick up this vehicle, you have from the 28th of November when it was released until the 26th of December, so Boxing Day, and 3 different bundles. The Ultimate Bundle, which comes with equipment, boosters and premium time for 16,600 gold. The Loaded Bundle, which comes with premium time and boosters for 14,500 gold. And the Base Bundle, which is the tank on its own for 12,900 gold, so a step up from what you've seen with the Black Friday bundles and the Jaguar Black Edition, which was a very decent tank. So we'll have to see whether it is worth that increase in price. And now we're going to head over to Excel, where I've got the stats of the Warden here on the left, and we're going to be comparing in today's video to the Leopard VT2, which shares the same gun with some slightly different gun handling stats, the Super M48 with another very thick turret, very similar playstyle with a slightly smaller 105mm gun, and the Magak 5, which is the Independent Alliance Era 2 medium tank. It has a very similar hull to the M48, which is on the Warden, and it's a kind of similar hull down playstyle, so I've included that on the right just to see if anything is different from these other sort of heavily armoured turrets compared to the Magak 5's turret, which can be penetrated a little bit easier than the other 3 vehicles in this comparison. So if you haven't seen my reviews before, green is the best stat in the comparison, red is the worst, and orange is somewhere in between, and the ones here highlighted in yellow are with my commander and equipment setup applied to the base stats, and I'll talk you through what my setup is in just a little bit. But we are going to start by having a look at the bonus of the Silver XP and Commander XP, as it is a premium vehicle. So you have a 50% silver bonus, which is the same as the Super M48 and the Magak 5, whereas the Leopard VT2 comes out on top with 55%, a 10% XP bonus, which is the same as the M48 and the Magak 5, and it's only beaten by the Leopard VT2, which has 20%, and you have a 25% Commander XP bonus, so that's the joint best in this comparison with the Super M48 and the Magak 5, and it beats the Leopard VT2, so a slightly better crew trainer, still a pretty decent silver and XP bonus. Now we're going to get on into the raw stats of these vehicles, and just to mention, the Warden and the Leopard VT2 share the same 120mm caliber gun, and the Super M48 and the Magak 5 have 105mm caliber guns, so expect their alpha damages to be slightly lower, possibly with higher DPM. And just to reiterate again, the Warden is the hull of the Era 1 M48P1, but it's a very similar hull to that on the Magak 5. It's got the Era 2 Leopard VT2's gun and the Era 3 Leopard 2's turret, so a very strong turret down in Era 2. First, we're going to start off with the hit points, so 2,900, a very healthy slug of hit points. You can see it's 100 more than Magak 5, and in this comparison, it's only beaten by the Leopard VT2, which has 30 more, and you have 50 more than the Super M48, so plenty of hit points, and you definitely need it, because although the turret's strong, the hull isn't very strong at all, and yet it can catch you out if you are not hull down. One of the worst aspects of this tank is the view range, 505 meters. It's beaten by the other tanks in this comparison, and you'll want to try and boost that, because otherwise you will not be spotting other medium and heavy tanks, let alone all of the light tanks and some of the tank destroyers in Era 2. It can catch you out. It's not the end of the world in Cold War because of the True Vision system. As you can see, everyone all of the time. However, if they're in a bush on a ridgeline, it can be hard to spot quite a lot of tanks, and that is a negative to this vehicle. In terms of the mobility, regardless of your very, very large size, you have a pretty decent mobility for the kind of armour that you have on this vehicle, especially on the turret. You have a 1200 horsepower engine, which gives you a power to weight ratio of 21.22, 65 kilometers an hour forwards, 27 kilometers an hour in reverse, 38 degrees a second on your hull, and 40 degrees a second on your turret. So as you can see, there are 4 best in class in terms of the engine power, power to weight, reverse speed, and turret traverse. The reverse speed is very nice for getting down off of those ridge lines, using your 9 degrees of gun depression, and using your very thick turret armour. Great engine power, which means that you have the best power to weight in this comparison, which is fantastic news. The Leopard VT2 is only 0.2 kilometers an hour in the lead there in terms of the top forward speed, and you're faster than the other two vehicles, the Super M48 and the Magak 5. In terms of your hull traverse, it's the worst in this comparison. However, the Magak 5 has slightly worse, but I haven't included it in the main comparison part. The Leopard VT2 and Super M48 do turn their hull slightly faster, so you might want to think about something like traction system with the mobility equipment to help with that, or there are some commander skills that you can help to improve that, like clutch braking. It's not the end of the world, just watch out, because you do want to still try and get the thickest part of your armour around to your enemies when they're trying to circle you. And although it's not really thick with an Era 1 hull, it still can bounce sort of autocannon rounds and low penetration rounds. And turret traverse, 40 degrees a second, fantastic for snapping your gun around, and with gun handling skills that will improve to a very good level. As you can see here, I now have a hull traverse of nearly 42 degrees a second and a turret traverse of just shy of 50 degrees a second, so very good for such a large medium tank that plays a kind of heavier gameplay style. Now we're going to get on into the gun of this vehicle, which is a 120mm caliber gun, pretty much identical to the Leopard VT2's 120mm, and the other two vehicles, the Super M48 and Magak 5, having 105mm caliber guns. So on the Warden with this 120mm caliber gun, you have the exact same gun stats in this first section here as the Leopard VT2, 1650 meters a second shell velocity on your standard APF SDS and your premium APF SDS, and 1140 meters a second on your heat round. So your standard and premium, great for firing at mid to long ranges, sniping at targets that are moving quickly, and as you can see, these are better than the other two vehicles in this comparison. You have heat as your third ammunition selection, whereas the other two vehicles have HESH. However, even though you have the heat penetration, which retains its penetration over distance, you lose that shell velocity. It's harder to hit weak spots at that distance, and with all the composite explosive reactive armor protecting against heat, ATGM and HE, it's very, very inadvisable to actually carry any heat rounds on this tank, in my opinion. Heat's very hard to use, and only take a select few if you feel you need it for the penetration over distance. In terms of the alpha damages on this 120mm caliber gun, 510, the same as on the Leopard VT2. It's 50 more than on the Super M48 and the Magak 5, as they have lower 105mm caliber guns. In terms of penetration, you have the joint worst with the VT2 at 418mm. It's only a little bit behind the Magak 5, but the Super M48 comes miles out on top there at 449 standard pen. It's not the end of the world, and you still can pen pretty much everything frontally. However, you do have to aim for those weak spots. However, you do have very nice premium pen at 504 millimeters, which is 1mm less than the Super M48's 505, which is the best in class, and better premium rounds than on the Magak 5, and those definitely can go through everything you come across frontally, and they're very good for taking out things like the FV4 211, so great premium rounds and pretty decent standard pen, although it is beaten by the Super M48. And then we're going to get on to the third ammunition selection, which of course is those heat rounds, 490mm of pen, so not quite as good as your premium APF SDS, but they do retain penetration over distance. They are slower, and they have the same alpha damage, and I don't really recommend it with all of the composite explosive reactive armor in Era 2. Other two vehicles have HESH rounds, which of course have that 250mm of pen for 570 alpha damage, slower shell velocity, but they're much more useful against lightly armored targets, as they do improve the DPMs of those tanks if you penetrate with the slightly lower penetration. Now we're going to get on into the gun handling part of this video, and as you can see, the Warden has the same poor 2.3 second aim time. It's poor in this comparison, beaten by the other two tanks. However, it's not the end of the world, and you can get it to a decent level for the slightly higher caliber gun. In terms of the Warden's 120mm caliber gun, you have the worst in this comparison in terms of the accuracy, 0.36. Even the Leopard VT2's same gun has a slightly better accuracy at 0.34, which is the best in this comparison. The Super M48 beats you, and the Magak 5, if it was included in this main comparison, would come out on top, but that is to be expected with a lower caliber gun. You can get your accuracy down to a reasonable level, although it can still feel a little bit derpy, even if you are sort of min-maxing, trying to get the best gun stats you can with things like combat rations as well. So be warned, it can feel a little bit derpy. You have a 6.45 rate of fire, which means you reload in 9.3 seconds for 3,290 DPM. Compared to the Leopard VT2, you have a better DPM. As you can see, you reload in 0.5 second better. However, the other two vehicles have got the better DPMs in this comparison. The Magak 5 the best, then it's the Super M48, and down below there, the Leopard VT2. In terms of ammo capacity, Super M48 carries the most rounds, as does the Magak 5, but they are 105mm caliber guns. You carry 8 more rounds than the Leopard VT2. You have the exact same 9 degrees of gun depression and 20 degrees of gun elevation, which is the joint best in this comparison. Everything is the exact same, apart from the Super M48 and Magak 5 have 19 degrees of gun elevation, so 1 degree less. Pretty good on a ridgeline. It would be nice to have sort of 10 degrees on this vehicle. However, you can make that work on pretty much every ridgeline you will use in the game in this vehicle, and 20 degrees of gun elevation is more than enough. But yeah, 9 degrees of gun depression with this turret, very, very strong, with the decent standard pen, great premium pen, high alpha damage, and pretty decent DPM for the caliber of the gun. It's just finding those hold down locations to be able to use it. You can get into position reasonably quickly with the nice mobility of this vehicle, healthy slug of hit points, but you do have poor view range and you are very large, and if you give people your hull, it's an Era 1 hull with no sort of composite explosive reactive armor over it. You only have some spaced armor over the side, so definitely watch out for people shooting your hull. It's very large and you can inadvertently give it to your opponents and they can take you out. So that's it for the stats review part of this video. I'll now talk you through my commander and equipment setup, how that affects the stats of this vehicle. Then we're going to go into the garage and have a look at the armor profile of this vehicle. So in terms of what equipment I run on this vehicle, I choose to completely try and maximize the DPM and gun handling out of this vehicle. So I run the advanced loader, improved ventilation, and the gun stabilizer. And in terms of my commander skills, 6th sense, born leader, rapid loading, steady aim, rapid aim, snapshot, run and gun, clutch braking to help the whole traverse, and off-road driving to further help the terrain resistances, make you a little bit quicker over ground to try and avoid taking fire into your very large hull. You could take either of the clutch braking, off-road driving, or both to improve something else about the vehicle. You could take Deadeye to improve your chance of damaging sort of crew and modules with your higher caliber gun. You have a 180 module damage per shot, I believe, so that could be a good option. Or you could try to improve something like the truck mechanic to improve your repair speed or armor angling as you'll be brawling on ridge lines to reduce the damage you take by 5%. But that's a template for people to use, and if you run the same setup as me, you will have improved your view range from 505 to 559 meters. So although not as good, still 1 meters behind the Leopard VT2's base stat, it's enough to be able to spot sort of reasonably well for yourself. The only thing that changes in terms of the mobility is the hull traverse, with the clutch braking and the off-road driving improving from 38 to 41.56 degrees a second, and your turret traverse with all of the gun handling skills improving from 40 to 49.84 degrees a second. Aim time drops from 2.3 to 2.08, and your accuracy drops dramatically to 0.28, although it does still feel a little bit derpy. Rate of fire improves to 6.61, which means we now reload for 1 shot shell in 6.61 seconds, giving us a DPM of 4,626, which is quite nice for a 120mm caliber gun. So that's it for the stats review of the Warden. We're now going to head on over into the garage, have a look at the armour profile of this vehicle, and then we're going to get stuck into the first of 5 gameplays. So I'll see you over in the garage in just a second. So here we are in the garage having a look at the armour viewer of the Warden. It's the hull of the Era 1 M48. It's the gun of the Era 2 premium tank, the Leopard VT2, and the turret of the Era 3 Leopard 2. So going to be a very strong turret. However, the Leopard 2 is sort of the lowest level in Era 3. However, when you do drop that down to Leopard 2, it is still going to be pretty decent. So the thickest parts of the armour are going to be on the turret. So the strongest part is 345mm for an Era 2 medium tank. Very strong indeed. To this left part of the gun as you're looking at it on the turret. Then you have these sections at 325mm to the right. 280mm, which is a kind of weak spot you can look at, kind of like a viewport, and you can go in there a little bit easier with Era 2 guns. 250mm around the mantlet, another section behind that at 240mm. Then you have a whole range of sort of armour plates in the region of sort of 205, 200mm for the turret ring, and a section below that at 177mm. So if this is face hugging you, you can shoot down into that and have a relatively good penetration with mediocre penetration in Era 2, but when it's using its 9 degrees of gun depression, very, very strong, apart from that section, which is this 280mm part here. So if you're a little bit angled like this and it's not looking at you, it can be a flatter shot to hit. However, it's going to be a smaller shot as it's not easy to go through the thickest part, which is below that. So a very, very strong turret indeed. The hull, however, isn't too great as it's an Era 1 hull, and it's very large as you can see. 152mm is the thickest part, and it's the sort of mid part between the upper hull and the lower plate. There's no composite armour, and it's very easy to penetrate the hull. You have some more space sort of armour around the mantlet at 150mm, and these other sections at 130mm. 127mm of kind of upper hull armour at the bottom and upper lower plate armour, so not very thick at all. It's kind of boat shaped as you can see, and a very easy lower plate penetration. Some more sections on the sides of the turret. Then this triangle section here, 110mm on the upper hull and on the lower plate. So if you angle, it can protect you against sort of low penetration and autocannon rounds. However, it's terrible against good penetration and ATGMs, and it's a massive wide target as you can see. In terms of the side armour of this vehicle, 76mm of front side armour, and the rear side armour of this vehicle is 50.8, so you can side scrape very well in this tank with some spaced armour over the sides, as you can see here with the grating over the sides. The truck themselves are 20mm and 15mm with spaced armour, which can protect against HE and some ATGM damage, and if you're kind of side scraping and baiting ATGMs into it, sometimes your tracks can absorb the whole thing. Some more spaced armour round with this kind of skin that this vehicle has at 15mm, but it doesn't really do much at all. The key things that you have to know about this vehicle is hull down extremely strong. Premium rounds can go through, especially that 280mm weak part. If you're using your 9 degrees of gun depression, it becomes very strong, very hard to hit any of the weak spots on the turret. Turret ring you can pen if it's face hugging you. However, the upper hull, lower plate are massive, very easy to pen and only good at angled against autocannon rounds. Side scraping pretty decent, but as soon as people get your side and your rear, yeah, it's not very, very good at all. In fact, it's very, very poor, and people can go for it with hash rounds as well, with your engine being 25.4mm of armour covering it at the rear. So that's it for the armour viewer of the Warden. We're now going to get stuck into the first of 5 gameplays. So here we are on Raseiniai in the Warden, and we've spawned in the southwestern corner of this map. It's team destruction, so no capture circles, and we're going to make our way into the castle where we can use the 9 degrees of gun depression, the Leopard 2 turret to bounce some shells, and hopefully put some nice damage and shots in ourselves with our 120mm caliber gun. You can see the mobility isn't too bad for the size of this medium tank. It definitely plays a heavium style gameplay role on the battlefield. It's a very large profile medium tank, so you do have to be very careful about being spotted, and when you are spotted you will take fire very, very easily. Your Era 1 hull from the M48 isn't going to hold up to any kinds of rounds apart from autocannon rounds in Era 2, so be very careful. There's no composite or explosive reactive armour all over the front of this vehicle like there would be on something like the Magak 5, so anything that hits your hull will probably go in. However, when you are hull down like we are here to some of these tanks in the north of the map, you are very, very strong with this Leopard 2 turret bouncing some shots very easily. We're not taking any shots at the moment, we're just going to be taking our chance to get some nice damaging shots in when the enemies are spotted. I don't want to be any more aggressive than we are so far, because if you do get caught out and take fire from multiple angles, those 2,900 hit points do not last very long at all. If you're on a ridgeline, you can definitely be confident of sitting on a ridgeline and pretty much bouncing most rounds that are going to be fired at you, apart from some premium rounds. ATGMs have a very small chance of being able to go through the turret. However, usually they will just do some splash damage and the turret armor will absorb quite a lot of the damage. So when you find yourself in that hold down position and you know the enemy haven't got a shot on your hull, that is the time to sort of be very confident and put this gun to work. But when you are spotted and when people try to flank you and get around the side, you are very, very vulnerable, and it can become quite difficult to get out of certain scenarios. You've got a decent enough mobility to sort of get into position and to relocate, but you've got to be very aware of where you are on the battlefield. If numerous tanks come at you at once, like a platoon or a light tank tries to circle you, you're not going to last very long. And although your DPM isn't too bad for the higher caliber gun that you have on a medium tank, you can get shredded by some of the medium tanks in Era 2 and some of the light tanks that have the multiple weapon system and can really put the hurt on you. So be very wary of your positioning with this vehicle. I didn't really enjoy the gameplay so much because it relies very, very heavily on getting into those hold down locations, and sometimes it's just not feasible to do that. Some maps don't suit that hold down playstyle as well as others, and I feel like even though you have a nice alpha damage of 510, it just took quite a while to get to grips with this tank. It's not quite as easy to pick up as some of the other medium tanks. It's just pretty solid. It's nothing spectacular, and I would say the previous release in Cold War, the Jaguar Black Edition, is much, much better. The all-round armour is much better, and it just feels like a much more fun tank to play, even though it doesn't have the gun depression that the Warden has. But as you can see, when you do start firing with this 510 Alpha, the damage doesn't take too long to rack up. It's just trying to find these positions here where you get hold down and you try and put the hurt into the enemy. You can see there that the bloom is quite big on the gun, as we haven't got combat rations in this particular game. I started off using smokescreen on this vehicle to try and get out of some sticky situations when you get spotted. However, for the rest of the gameplay, I believe in today's video you'll be watching me play with the combat rations to further improve the DPM and also improve the view range and the gun handling of this vehicle. So that ends a pretty quick round there, and that was very indicative of the kind of round I was having in the Warden. Sometimes it can take a little while to find the right position. When you do, depending on how good the enemy team is or how good your team are, you can't always just sit on a ridgeline the whole game. You do have to move with the flow of the battle, but we picked up 5.5k direct damage, 200 assistance, blocked 530, decent profit with or without a premium account, and only a 4-minute battle. So when you do find those positions with that 510 Alpha, you do start to pick up the damage, and as you watch the next 4 gameplays, you'll be seeing a little bit better gameplay from me as I start to get used to the vehicle a little bit more. So that's it for the first gameplay. We're now going to head on into the second one. So we are now on Fredvang in the Warden in a standard battle. We've spawned in the southwestern corner of the map, and we're going to make our way into position in the sort of centre of this map with the ridge lines, try and use the 9 degrees of gun depression, the great turret, and get shots in where we can. So I talked about in the first gameplay that I struggled to kind of get to grips with this medium tank for my sort of first play session in it yesterday when it came out on the 28th of November, and it was just a play session that was decent enough. I had a relatively good win rate, a decent amount of combined damage. It just didn't feel too enjoyable to play. Partly, I think I had some unfortunate teams. It always feels like that when you have some bad sessions. And partly, I just don't find this particular playstyle enjoyable. It doesn't really have the DPM to compete with some of the better medium tanks in Era 2, and because of the very large hull, it can be very difficult to find the perfect ridgeline to be able to go hull down and use this turret, because quite often you'll be exposing more than you think of your tank. So I think that I'm hull down, I'll take some damage, and it just appears that they've catched the upper part of my upper plate, and because there's no real armour behind it and it's an Era 1 hull, it can feel a little bit disappointing. But when you're angled up and you're on a ridgeline, it can become quite strong. You can see here, this is a very dangerous position for someone to fight a Warden in, and we have time in between the shots to kind of fall back. Even though the DPM is obviously quite good for a 120mm caliber gun, it can still feel long compared to some of the guns at an Era 2, so you can be tempted to kind of sit on a ridgeline or pop out a little bit earlier, and that means that you can take more damage from the enemy than you wish, or take more shots as it were, and sort of give your positioning away. So you do have to be quite patient. You've got a decent enough reverse speed to get off of ridgelines quite quickly. It just wasn't really my playstyle. You can't play extremely aggressive and use it like a ramming vehicle because the mobility isn't quite good enough to do that, and although it's a very, very large medium tank, you don't quite have the weight behind you, even with the well-armoured Leopard 2 turret. And yeah, you don't do too much ramming damage. You can't be aggressive in that scenario. And if people get behind you, then you're going to be taken out very quickly. Whereas some other sort of heavy tanks in Era 2 can go and play aggressive because they've got great hull armour and they can use the DPM. Some medium tanks have just great outright DPM. This has kind of got a bit of everything, and it's going to suit those players who like to play relatively passive, who like to find a good position, mid-range support the heavies like we are doing here. And when you do find those good ridgelines, that is when you can become very effective. It's just a very solid tank, but in my opinion, it's not too fun to play. It's not my particular play style, but as I played it more, I've started to enjoy it a little bit more, and the sort of gameplay you're going to see from now forwards is me playing the tank when I started to enjoy it a little bit more. So yeah, that's my kind of thoughts on this vehicle. It's solid in most aspects. The turret is extremely strong. The gun's a little bit derpy still, even with all of the gun handling skills and using combat rations. It's just a decent medium tank, and when you find that perfect hold down position, it can become exceptionally strong. However, it's definitely not invincible. It has no like unique features, but you can do some lovely stuff like that and ram a WZ-1323 to death. You might not be fantastic at ramming other heavy tanks or other medium tanks, but you're definitely good against light tanks. You do have a pretty decent hull traverse to be able to get your sort of gun around and your turret around and your hull around and all of the strongest parts of your armour for that kind of situation. We've picked up 6.3k damage in this game just by going to a ridge and supporting what our team was spotting for us. We managed to finish with a nice profit with or without a premium account, second class mastery, fourth in the team, 6.3k direct damage, and again sort of just shy of 4-minute battle, so a very quick battle. When you find those shots, the damage racks up with this nice high alpha damage. It just doesn't set the world alight in terms of what I like to play inside World of Tanks console. But we're now going to head on into the third game, and I'll see you over there in just a second. So now we are on Mountain Pass in the Warden in a standard battle, and we have made our way into this position here in J3, just waiting for a little bit of support. And now I'm going to go all in on these two tanks, the Jaguar Black and the T-72A. I'm going to try and get as many shots in before we take some damaging fire from the enemy team. Fortunately, the T-72A leaves his Jaguar Black friend, and we can put this gun to work on this medium tank. Now we can use this position here and get some crossfire on the enemies in the middle. So it's a bit of a risk coming to this particular situation here. We could have been sort of taken out, or they could have been great players, and me and this heavy tank behind me would have struggled to get through this situation. Fortunately, we kind of scared the T-72A off there, and if we took this position, I knew that we're going to get shots into all of the tanks that were in the middle of the map. So now we're just going to town on the back of a T-55 Enigma. We got just enough gun depression to use this position here with 9 degrees, and and we still have this T-72A beneath us. So as soon as he's taken out, we can then start to turn our attentions to maybe going down the middle and taking the other T-55 Enigma off. But as soon as I was making that decision, we noticed this glut of enemy tanks behind us, so we're going to turn around and then we're going to try and do this little battle here in the south of this map. It can be quite weird fights when there are three of you in a line. You kind of all drive out in front of each other, but with the reload of this tank and the higher alpha, it means that you do have time to kind of fall back in between shots, let your opponents or your friendly tanks shoot at your opponents, then you can go back forward and try and time your reloads with the tanks that are around you. So whenever I'm firing, the friendly tanks reloading and vice versa, and hopefully we can get out of this situation. So trying to let the heavy tank take some of the shots as more likely to bounce off of his hull. If I was hull down here, I'd be more than happy just to sit in front of these tanks. However, even angled, we're going to struggle to bounce shells off of the tanks in front of us. The T-72 pops a smoke screen there, which is a little bit frustrating, but I think he's just trying to get into a slightly better position, and it does allow us to sort of have some respite. Then maybe we can catch a sneaky ambush shot off on these tanks at the moment. And as long as you're not getting pushed and everything's friendly and you're supporting your heavy tanks, as you can see there, at this kind of distance, this 120mm caliber gun feels very nice with this high alpha. It allows us to get a shot off, fall back, and then, you know, within 12-13 seconds you've done around 1020 damage, I should say, with your 2 shots. So yeah, not my particular playstyle, but it's more than adequate enough to have some decent games in it. It does suit players that like to play slightly more passive, who like to get hull down, support the heavy tanks, maybe not be all over the place in a lightly armoured medium tank with great DPM. And yeah, people that don't like to play light tanks are going to do probably quite well with this vehicle. It just struggles with its hull, and it can feel a little bit sluggish and derpy in terms of its reload and its gun. So now there's 2 enemies left on the enemy team. Both of them are situated in the sort of north towards our base, so it doesn't look like we're going to get there in time, but we're going to try and put the mobility to work here, getting over this bridge, and hopefully get some last remaining damage out of this game. And this is a scenario I found myself in quite often with this tank during my couple of play sessions in the Warden. You have a decent game, it's just I can't seem to push it to that next level. Part of it's because I don't really enjoy the playstyle, part of it's down to the tank, and in some scenarios you just can't be as aggressive as you can be in other medium or heavy tanks. However, still a decent result there in another game around 4 minutes 34 seconds. Good profit with or without a premium account, 1 kill, 6.2k direct damage and 272 assistance. So that's it for the third game there. We're now going to head on into the fourth one. So now we are on Kaunas in the fourth game of today's video. We are in the Warden in a standard battle, and we have made our way sort of covering this side of the map on the eastern side, trying to get some shots off at the north towards that windmill where a lot of tanks like to hide, especially light tanks. Nothing really came for the first minute there. However, I didn't want to sort of turn around and go anywhere else, because as you can see, all of our team have gone down the eastern side, so we're just going to support their vision and put this gun to work. You can see at the bottom of the screen just a note on the ammunition, absolutely no heat rounds at all, kind of half and half with a slightly more standard rounds, but yeah, half and half with the APF SDS. Heat rounds just don't seem to work for me at all in eras 2 and 3. In era 1, just a little bit, and the penetration is more than enough on the standard and on the premium rounds, I feel, even with the penetration drop off, to not need the heat rounds. So we've picked up 2,000 damage. Of course, for the first minute we were just waiting to find someone to shoot at, and now we can turn around and defend the base from the enemy's push. And you can see that even though we did wait for that first minute, the damage does rack up with this very nice alpha damage. So we have some shots here, just trying to go hull down, trying to limit the amount of the tank that the enemies have to shoot at. Unfortunately, we are now having our base contested, so I'm going to go forward a couple of ridge lines and see if we can get some shots off at the tanks and try and reduce the crossfire that the enemy have on us in this situation. But I do have to be a little bit careful, can't really go out into the open here, as there is a very good chance that we will get taken out from multiple angles, and as soon as tanks have you at multiple angles or they get your hull, yeah, they're going to go straight through you, just like that enemy Warden did there. Unfortunately, he exposed more of his tank than he should have, and what happened there is he got absolutely obliterated. So we got 3.5k damage, and now we're going to push with this heavy tank against this bandit who is on full health. We've only got 1800 left, but I see the bandit's taken a shot from our heavy tank, and now I'm going to go in and try and get us through this situation. So unfortunately we take a shot from the rear there, which means I'm just going to have to go through this smoke that the bandit popped, go into first person so we actually can see where the bandit has gone, which allows us to get the shot off before him. We're going to try and turn his turret. Our heavy tank gets a shot into him, and that allows us to get our final shot, taking out the bandit. There's an FV4-11 in the distance there, so we've switched to our premium rounds, as you can see, and as soon as he kind of backs up or turns his attention to someone else, we can advance and use some of the ridgelines in front of us, trying to get hull down at every opportunity in this vehicle, and yeah, trying just to limit the amount of the hull that the enemy have to shoot at us. And what you're going to see here is me thinking that I'm hull down in a certain position, and the FV4-11 managing to penetrate us very easily. So here I knew that I was way too far, just trying to get shots to the left of me, but I've dropped back. I think that I'm completely hull down here, so there's nothing the FV4-11 to shoot, and I'm going to lurch up ever so slightly too much forward here, and I believe the FV4-11 gets a shot right into the top part of our upper plate there. Unfortunately for us, that takes us out of the game, but we still picked up another 6.5k damage, 543 assistance, 2 kills in this game. You can see I think one shot did go through my turret there, a gold round, almost guaranteed to be gold round to go through there, and also a shot through the upper plate. So that's it for this fourth gameplay here. We're going to skip to the end screen, see if our team managed to pull through, and see how we did. So after a big song and dance, our team managed to go through and get the win. We finish in third place on our team with 6.5k direct damage, 543 assistance, 2 kills, and a lovely profit with or without a premium account. So that's it for the fourth gameplay. We're now going to head on into the fifth and final gameplay of today's video. So now we are on Airfield in the fifth and final gameplay of today's video, and we are here over on the eastern side of the map in a standard battle, and we're going to make our way into the centre of the map. I've told my team where I'm going to be going, and someone has agreed to come with me, and that means that I feel pretty confident going into this brawling location. We do have to be a little bit careful as these ridgelines are quite steep and quite difficult to use, even 9 degrees of gun depression, but there are some nice alcoves we can get into to reverse up out of trouble. I just want to try and get into position, and fortunately we managed to avoid taking less than just one shot there, which means we managed to pick up a pretty nice position and allows us to get a crossfire on this M113 here, who was being very aggressive in a tank destroyer with absolutely no armour. We have our T-72A there to the right of me, T-72AV to be exact. Unfortunately, he is going to be taking fire from this VT2 and also potentially from the 30B2 down below us. I'm trying to get as many shots into this VT2 as possible. Unfortunately, what happened there is that I couldn't have a shot on his hull. The turret of the VT2 extremely strong, like it is on the Warden, which allows that VT2 to bounce the shell, but it doesn't seem like he's coming back around. So what we're going to do is take out this M113. It's always very weird to know where the M113 is actually facing, because of the gun just being on top of the tank like that with no turret. Sometimes it can catch you out, but we take him out. We've picked up our first kill and got 1,977 damage. We're going to drop down, take out this 30B2 for Rad, and then we can turn our attention maybe to this bandit over in the distance, and then we can also go up back where the T-72AV is and maybe push on through the middle. But I'm just waiting here for a shot on the bandit. We've got enough penetration to be able to go through his turret more often than not at this kind of mid-range. However, he is just sort of hiding behind that rock, which is perfectly acceptable for him to do. It's a good tactic, and it's keeping me from sort of advancing up. I want to try and take out this bandit if I can, get him out of that situation. Unfortunately, what I didn't realise to the left of me is how little hit points our T-72AV is on, and the Leopard VT2 on the enemy team is going to take him out. So a little bit of a tunnel vision there by me. However, I just want to try and get this bandit out of this position. It's being very, very annoying, and if he's out of that position, I can kind of advance around maybe towards the enemy's base. It's a very close game. The VT2 kills our friendly T-72AV, so we're going to take the time while he is reloading his same gun as me, a pretty long reload. We're going to take the time, kill him, and then hopefully we can take out this bandit. Fortunately for us, the WZ-132 3 on our team takes him out. Then we're going to pop up here on this ridgeline and hopefully get some shells into some of the tanks that are in the centre of the map. Unfortunately, we haven't really found a shot here at the moment through these trees, so I'm going to reverse off this ridgeline as we have been detected, and we're going to turn our attention to this M60A2 who has put a shot into our light tank and what looked like set him on fire. M60A2 then takes out the RDF LT. We've got a light tank coming from his right, so I'm going to come up, use the distraction, and hopefully put the pretty nice DPM of this gun to work. And I'm hoping that the M60A2 just continues to ignore me, tries to focus on the light tank. Unfortunately, he tracks the light tank, which is a bit unfortunate. And now I've got to wait for my shot, put one into him, and I'm going to use the free camera to see if he's looking at us. He's turning his turret to the light tank. Unfortunately, we get tracked, but we do get around just in time to save our light tank from getting taken out. Unfortunately, there is a BMP2, and now it's not looking so good. We've picked up 5,000 damage, 2,100 assistance, just trying to get the last little bits out of this game. It's not looking good. We do bounce a shot there from the bandit in the side, probably the spaced armor there, just catching a stray round, and now we're just trying to get as much damage as possible, trying to angle to as many tanks as we can here. You can see that the front of this hull actually does pretty good at bouncing autocannon rounds, not so much tanks from the rear as the bandit takes us out. So that's it for the 5th gameplay there. I'm going to skip to the end to see how we did, and then I'll wrap up this video. So unfortunately that ends it in a defeat for the Warden there on Airfield. However, we still had a pretty decent game, finishing top on our team, 4 kills, 6.6k direct damage, 2.1k assistance, and we blocked 2.5k, quite a lot of that from autocannon showing you the hole, and the turret can do some pretty nice blocking damage for you in your gameplay. 5 minutes 23 second battle with a pretty decent combined result there, and that was the highest combined that I had in my 2 play sessions in this vehicle. As you've seen, some pretty good wins. It's a pretty solid vehicle, not my kind of play style, and it's quite a lot of money compared to something like the recently released Jaguar Black Edition. So if you're looking for a medium tank that feels a lot more all-round solid in terms of its armour, I'd go for the Jaguar Black, and it's cheaper. However, if you like a little bit of gun depression, playing quite passively, trying to get into those hold-down positions, then you'll probably find this tank is nice and solid. Nothing spectacular, just a decent premium tank. However, there are plenty of decent premium Era 2 medium tanks, and I can't say I recommend this one. It's not bad, it's just not great. So I hope you've enjoyed today's review and or found it entertaining. If you have, please leave a like and a comment down below. It really helps the channel out. Unfortunately, this is going out a couple of days after the release. Unfortunately, I've been in bed with a little bit of a virus, feeling slightly better now, and until next time, I will see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.